afternoon, Sergeant.
Afternoon.
Sir, you and I have never met, correct?
No.
We've never spoken.
No.
Sergeant Goode, you grew up in Canton?
I did.
You attended Canton Public Schools?
I did.
You graduated from Canton High School?
I did.
That would have been in 1998?
Yes.
Is it true that in your graduating class was somebody named Courtney Proctor?
Yes.
You knew Courtney Proctor?
Yes.
You knew her to be Michael Proctor's sister, correct?
Yes.
Also in your graduating class was somebody named Jill Daniels, correct?
Yes.
You knew her, or you now know her, to be Christopher Albert's sister-in-law, correct?
Yes.
Christopher Albert is married to Jill Daniels' sister, correct?
Yes.
And you know Christopher Albert as Brian Albert's brother, correct?
Yes.
So it is fair to say that you graduated high school with Michael Proctor's sister and Christopher Albert's sister-in-law, correct?
Yes.
And, growing up in Canton and, working for 18 years as a Canton police officer, you're well familiar with the Albert family of Canton, correct?
I work with one of them.
You know that the Albert family is a well-known family in Canton, correct?
Sure.
The Albert family is well connected to the town of Canton, correct?
I don't know what you mean by connected. They live in Canton. Yes.
All right, well, Christopher Albert is a Canton town selectman, is he not?
Yes.
And you've already established that Kevin Albert is a Canton police officer, correct?
Yes.
And you already testified that you knew Brian Albert as well, and you knew that he was a Boston police officer who lived in Canton, correct?
Yes.
In fact, he and his family lived at 34 Fairview in Canton, correct?
Yes.
You also knew that his family had been there for years. And before Brian Albert owned the house, his parents owned it, correct?
Yes.
Now, as of January 28th of 2022, who among the Albert family did you know either personally or professionally?
Professionally is Kevin Albert.
Okay, and what about personally?
I knew Chris.
And you know that Christopher Albert, in addition to being a town selectman, also owns a pizza place in Canton, correct?
Yes, he does.
What's the name of that pizza place?
That'd be D&E.
And have you eaten there before?
Yes.
You've seen Christopher Albert there before?
I have.
Now, on January 29th of 2022, you learned at approximately 6 a.m. that John O'Keefe's body was found on Brian Albert's front lawn, correct?
Yes.
And as of January 29th of 2022, you knew that Brian Albert at that time, of course, was the brother of your fellow Canton police officer, Kevin Albert, correct?
Yes.
And how long have you known Kevin Albert for?
As long as I worked at the Canton Police Department.
And that is approximately 18 years?
Coming up in 18 years, yes.
And is Kevin Albert older or younger than you or around the same age?
He's older than me.
By how many years, if you know?
I don't. Probably
Approximately?
5 years?
Okay. Have you ever shared a patrol car with Kevin Albert?
No.
Have you ever worked on an investigation or a case with Kevin Albert?
I probably have, yeah.
In addition to being a colleague, would you also consider Kevin Albert to be a friend?
Yeah, we've socially hung out after work.
And because he is a fellow Canton police officer, you'd expect that he would have your back in a crisis, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
No, I'll let him have it.
I hope he would defend me while working. Yes, he's a police officer.
You would certainly protect him in a crisis, correct?
At work, when we're police officers, yes.
Sure. Well, even out of work, if he was in a crisis, you'd probably help, correct?
I don't know what you're asking.
Well, there is a teamwork that is part and parcel of being a police officer with your fellow officers, correct?
Sure.
It's a dangerous job.
Sure.
You need to have each other's back.
Sure.
You need to depend on your fellow officers, correct?
Sure.
And it's been said there's a brotherhood among police officers, correct?
To a fact.
And, when you meet another police officer, he or she will tell you that they're, quote, on the job, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
The objection sustained.
And in terms of, depending on your fellow officers, you're taught all this beginning in the police academy, correct?
Objection.
No, he can have that.
What am I taught?
Well, I'm asking you. With regard to the teamwork and, having each other's backs and, working together and depending on each other, you're taught that starting in...
Sure.
And it's reinforced over the years by superior officers and your colleagues, correct?
Sure.
Now, you were assigned as the primary investigator in the reconstruction analysis for this case, correct?
Assigned as the what?
You were assigned as the primary investigator in the reconstruction analysis for this case.
I don't know reconstruction analysis. No, I was the patrol supervisor that day.
If I may just have a moment, Your Honor.
Okay.
May I approach?
Yes.
I'm going to show the whole thing, directing to page 5, where that line is. Now, I'm going to show you what is, not sure how many pages, but there are quite a few.
Okay.
It's a,
Your Honor, if he could not describe what he's showing to the witness and
Yeah,
just
just
show
go
it to
ahead
him.
and show it to him.
sure. I'm going to direct you, I'm taking up the first 4 pages and directing you just to the 5th page. sir.
Okay.
And specifically the second paragraph, and it's numbered number 2.
Okay.
And I will ask you if you've seen that before.
Okay.
And I'll take it back from you.
Okay.
Do you, may-
Sure.
thank you. Do you recognize what this is?
Looks like some state police form.
Okay. Is it a
Why don't you not ask him? He just answered what he thought it was.
are you familiar with a collision analysis and reconstruction section, a CARS report?
I know the state police has a cars section that handles motor vehicle homicide.
Does this appear to be a CARS report?
I've never seen one. You just showed me one. I'm not in the state police.
Okay. But you did see that your name is listed in the paragraph that I pointed out to you,
Sure.
and you're listed as Sergeant Sean Goode, that's you, correct? Of the Canton Police, and you were assigned as the primary investigator in this reconstruction.
Because I wrote the offense report from that day.
Well, I'm just asking you. I'm dealing with a state police report that lists you as the primary investigator with regard to the reconstruction.
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach?
Sustained. Sure, why don't you all come up for a minute? Bring that, please.
Sergeant Goode, what was your understanding on February 1st of 2022 regarding the Canton Police Department's role in this homicide investigation?
I believe at some point on the 29th, we recused ourselves and we weren't part of the investigation.
Okay. So you did know as of the day that John O'Keefe was found on Brian Albert's front lawn that the Canton Police had recused itself from the case, correct?
At some point, I was notified after I finished all my paperwork, yeah.
And what was your understanding of the recusal decision in terms of what Canton Police was either allowed to do or not do?
Well, he had passed away, so now is no matter what, it's state police investigation. It's a homicide. We do not investigate homicides.
Well, you've been a Canton police officer for 18 years, correct?
Yes.
During those 18 years, do you know how many homicide investigations have occurred in Canton?
None.
None?
Homicides? No. That I was involved in? None.
That the department was involved in?
I can't think off the top of my head, no.
So in the 18 years, this is the first homicide that you've been in, your department's been involved in, to your knowledge?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware that although the state police have primary jurisdiction, they work hand in hand with local departments, usually, unless there's a conflict of interest?
Yes.
So in this case, you learned that there was a conflict of interest. And my question to you is, what did that mean in terms of your potential involvement in the investigation once that conflict was determined?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Were you the primary investigator for the Canton Police Department as of February 1st?
No.
Did you participate with the state police in any part of the reconstruction?
No.
Now, Sergeant Goode, who is Brian Higgins?
He is a ATF agent that has a satellite office out of the Canton Police Department.
And when did you come to meet him?
I have no idea when he started. It's been years.
Years, over a decade?
I don't think so, but maybe.
Between 5 and 10 years?
Sure.
And how often would you see him at the Canton Police Station?
I worked midnights, so during that time, but I mean, 3 times a week I would see him. I mean, we don't have the same work schedule. I don't know when he works. He doesn't know when I do.
Okay, and when you say you work midnights, that means you come in at midnight?
Yes.
At 8 a.m.?
Correct.
And he works in the same building as you in terms of the fact that he has an office there, correct?
Yes.
Are there any other ATF agents that have offices at the Canton?
There could be. They don't check in with us.
Do you know of any ATF agents that have offices at the Canton Police Department?
Not that I know of, no.
What about officers from other local departments, surrounding towns? Do they have any offices at the Canton Police Department?
No.
And you're not sure exactly how long he's had that office for, but it's been years.
Correct.
He has his own key card to enter the building?
Yes.
And you say you've seen him 2 or 3 times a week in the time that he's had an office there?
Sure.
You're aware that Brian Higgins is a close friend of the former Canton Police Chief, Kenneth Berkowitz?
Sure.
You know that Chief Berkowitz was the reason that he was allowed to maintain an office at the Canton Police Department.
I didn't know that.
Well, his close friend, Chief Berkowitz, was your boss on January 29th of 2022, correct?
His close friend?
Yeah. Brian Higgins' close friend, Chief Berkowitz, was your boss on January 29th of 2022.
Okay.
And does okay mean yes?
Yes.
And you worked the midnight shift that day as well?
No.
What was your shift?
I took it off.
Were you assigned to dispatch that day?
The night of the incident?
Yes.
No, I stayed inside. I was inside.
Inside where?
The dispatch. I handle all the calls, send the guys everywhere.
All right, that was my question. I'm sorry if I'm
Okay.
I'm not being clear, but you were on duty, correct?
Yes.
What was your shift?
My shift was I stayed inside.
I'm sorry. What was the timing of your shift?
12 to 8.
Thank you. And when you say you stayed inside, that meant you were handling dispatch, correct?
Correct.
And when you're handling dispatch, you're not expected to leave the station and physically respond to calls that come in, correct?
It depends on the call. Anything within reason that a supervisor should go, I'm leaving the station.
Okay, but,
Normal car accidents, stuff like that patrol can handle, no.
okay, so unless it's something unusual, you're going to stay at dispatch, correct?
Correct.
And just after 1:30 a.m., while you were working dispatch, that's when you saw Brian Higgins enter the Canton Police Station at 1:30 in the morning, correct?
Correct.
Did he come into the dispatch area?
I said that earlier. I don't remember him coming in, or just did I see him on the cameras walking down the hallway. We have I think we have 7 or 8 monitors in front of me that I'm able to watch people around our building.
So it could be that you just saw him on a screen, or it could be that he was in your room,
Correct.
but you don't remember which, correct?
Correct.
And before he showed up there at 1:30, you hadn't called him to ask him to come in, correct?
No.
You hadn't asked him for any help with any investigation at 1:30, correct?
No.
When you first saw him there at 1:30, did you have any idea why he was showing up there?
No.
And when you first saw him, do you remember what entrance he used to come into the Canton Police Station?
I don't. It was from the back parking lot. I don't know if he was on the left back rear or right back rear.
And you would agree with me that 1:30 in the morning was hours before John O'Keefe was found unresponsive on Brian Albert's front lawn, correct?
Yes.
You had no information at 1:30 in the morning that John O'Keefe was out on Brian Albert's front lawn at that time, correct?
Correct.
And when Brian Higgins entered the department, that was the first time you had seen him on either the 28th or the 29th, correct?
Correct.
And this is again at 1:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
you have to say yes or no.
Yes.
Thank you. You didn't know where he was coming from?
No.
You didn't know what he had done that night?
Absolutely not.
You didn't know who he had been with that night?
No.
This was a Friday night into early Saturday morning with a major blizzard forecast.
Correct.
It had already started snowing.
Yes.
It was supposed to get worse.
Yes.
Was it unusual to see Brian Higgins come into the station at 1:30 a.m. on a weekend?
No.
And you don't recall how close you got to him.
No.
Are you able to tell this jury anything about his demeanor?
No. He just walked in. It's not unusual. We wouldn't have made pleasantries or say hello to each other. It's not uncommon.
And you don't recall whether or not you got close enough to him to smell his breath or to smell what he smelled like, correct?
No.
At any point, did he tell you why he was there?
No.
How long did he remain at the station for?
No idea. I only saw him come in, never saw him leave or anything like that.
Did you ever see him do any paperwork at the station?
That night?
Yes.
No.
Did you ever see him do any administrative work at the station?
I can't leave the dispatch room. His office is out on the second floor.
All right. So let's skip ahead a few hours later. You're still working dispatch when a call came in that a man was found unresponsive on Brian Albert's front lawn, correct?
Yes.
This is just after 6 a.m.
Yes.
You yourself took that call?
I did.
And with regard to who is responsible for entering the information that came in on a call to dispatch, who is that?
The person that's working the desk.
All right, so at 6 a.m., you were responsible for taking down the information and entering it into your system, correct?
It's being recorded through the 911 dispatch, correct. But I didn't enter it into our IMC program, which is our daily log.
Okay, who enters that into your daily log?
That'd be the person that's working the desk.
And you had previously testified that location is important, correct?
Correct.
You would discuss the fact that if a call comes in on a cell phone as opposed to a landline, you want to know where that cell phone is, correct?
Yes.
And you have ways of pinging the cell phone such that you can actually see the location on a map, correct?
Sure, yes.
And you would agree with me that ultimately when the location was entered into your system, the location was entered as 32 Fairview, correct?
No, it was 34. At least we put it out as 34.
34 was the actual address, but 32 is what made it into the police report, sir, did it not?
No, my police report says 34 Fairview.
I don't have access to the initial page that says 32. Okay. Now, when that call came in after 6 a.m., you decided that you would personally go out, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I actually have the front page of your police report. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes. Show Mr. Lally.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd ask you to read that silently to yourself, take a good look at it, and look up at me when you're done. And you've had enough time to review it?
Yes.
Getting back to the location, which you said was important, what is the location listed in your very police report?
On the face sheet, it says 32, but in my narrative is 34.
Okay. The face sheet is important, is it not?
Yes.
People see the face sheet before they get to the narrative, correct?
Sure.
Is accuracy important?
Yes.
And the very first thing that's entered with regard to the location is inaccurate, right?
Say it again.
The very first entry with regard to the location on your police report on the face sheet is inaccurate. Would you agree with that?
I guess so, yes.
And with regard to the name down the bottom of that report, I left the report in front of you so you could look at it again. Would you read that silently to yourself and look up at me?
Okay.
Does that refresh your memory as to what name is listed?
Yes.
What name is that?
John O'Keefe.
No. I can have that back for a minute. Okay. Now, you decided that you wanted to go to the call, or you decided it would be a good thing for you to go to the call personally, correct?
Yes.
So you called Officer Kelly Deaver into dispatch?
I did.
And you did that because you wanted her to cover the desk for you so that you could personally respond to the call, correct?
Correct.
Responding to the call wasn't your duty assignment, but you made it your duty assignment, correct?
Correct.
And if you were going to leave, somebody had to cover.
Correct.
After that, you personally called two of your other colleagues who were not on duty that night to respond with you to Brian Albert's house, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you previously testified, I believe, that Sergeant Michael Lank was one of those officers, and he arrived at 6:25 a.m., correct?
Correct.
And then Lieutenant Paul Gallagher was the other officer, and he arrived closer to 7 a.m., correct?
Yes.
When you responded to 34 Fairview on January 29th, did you know that residence?
Yes.
And what did you know that residence to be?
I knew that to be Brian Albert's house.
You and Sergeant Lank had both been to that residence before, correct?
No.
Together.
Actually, we have. We were there for a police report years ago.
Okay. And so when you decided to respond to the scene on January 29th, that residence of 34 Fairview, you knew exactly where you were going.
Yes.
And when you got there, you knew you were outside the home of Boston Officer Brian Albert, correct?
Yes.
And this was a memorable event. Would you agree with me?
Yes.
before January 29th of 2022, you had never responded to a call where the body of one police officer was found on the front lawn of another police officer's house, correct?
Yes.
And at some point after you arrived, you saw both Sergeant Lank and Detective Gallagher arrive, correct?
Yes.
It was Sergeant Lank who first entered the home and made initial contact with Brian Albert and his family?
No, I was right next to him.
So is it your testimony that the first time the police went in the house, you were there with Sergeant Lank?
Yes.
All right. And when you went in, can I have Exhibit 8 on the screen, please? Okay. Terrific. You're able to see Exhibit 8?
Yes.
Is that a fair depiction of what the house looked like when you entered it?
Yes.
Do you see the front door?
Yes.
Is that the door that you entered?
Yes.
And you had testified that you looked around the immediate area where you were while Sergeant Lank was asking questions. You noticed that when you entered that front door, you come into a foyer area, and directly in front of you on the left, you can almost reach out and touch, there's a door that goes down to the cellar, is there not?
I don't know. I don't remember a door there. I remember the stairs going up to the second floor.
I see. So you don't remember that as you step into the house, you can go down a cellar door right away?
Objection.
No, I don't know where his cellar is.
The objection sustained.
You don't know where the cellar is, and that's in part because you did not go down to the cellar, correct?
Correct.
You never examined it?
No.
You never saw what condition it was in?
No.
Saw whether there was any signs of struggle down there?
No.
You never saw if anything was tipped over?
No.
You never saw whether there was any blood or any other trace evidence down there?
Objection, Your Honor.
The objection sustained. You've made your point. Can we turn the lights back on, please? Do you need this, Ms. Giannetti?
I do not.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, now going back to when you first arrived, Sergeant, you were alone in your cruiser, correct?
Yes.
You weren't driving with a partner that morning.
No.
You were the second officer on scene?
No. Third.
Who got there before you did?
Officer Saraf and Officer Mulaney.
Okay, so Mulaney actually beat you there?
Yes.
But only within a matter of minutes, correct?
Sure.
You arrived in your marked cruiser, correct?
Yes.
You had your overhead emergency lights on, correct?
Correct.
You pulled up right in the front of the house, facing in the wrong direction in terms of the lane that you were in?
Correct.
You were parked on Fairview, adjacent to the Albert residence, and you were facing towards Cedar Crest, correct?
Correct.
When you parked, you left your motor running, correct?
Yes.
And when you got out of your cruiser, one prominent sound that you heard was Karen Reed screaming at the top of her lungs, correct?
Yes.
She appeared to be in distress.
Correct.
She appeared to be crying.
I did not see her crying.
She was hysterical.
Yes.
She was very loud.
Yes.
And you could hear her yelling throughout that morning, could you not?
Correct.
After you got there, other emergency vehicles showed up?
No.
Did you see any other cruisers show up?
If you want to call it an unmarked detective pickup truck or cruiser, sure.
Okay, so there was one additional police vehicle that showed up?
Sergeant Lang arrived in that, and then Lieutenant Paul Gallagher arrived in his unmarked cruiser.
Okay, so two additional vehicles. And also Officer Saraf's vehicle was there?
And Mulaney's, correct.
Mulaney. So we're now up to 4 police vehicles on scene?
Yes.
They all had their lights on?
No. Detective Sergeant Lanks does not have any lights in it, and neither did Paul Gallagher's lights were not activated, I believe.
I see. So you and Saraf and Mulaney had your lights on?
Correct.
And I actually miscounted. That would be 5 police vehicles, correct?
Sure.
All right. 3 with their lights on. What about ambulances?
There were 2 ambulances that showed up, one for the first transport of Officer O'Keefe and second for Miss Reed, but they were never there at the same time.
All right. When you first got there, was the first ambulance there?
It was.
And that ambulance also had its lights on?
Yes,
How many fire trucks were there when you were there?
just one.
And that also had its lights on as well?
Correct.
And engine running?
Yes.
And everyone was essentially parked around and in front of 34 Fairview, correct?
Correct.
And all the while, the first responders are talking over the noise of the storm, correct?
Yes.
And they're also talking over the screaming by Karen Reed, correct?
Sure.
At one point, Kerry Roberts even yelled at Karen, and I apologize for the language, but she yelled at her to shut the fuck up, correct?
I have no idea. I don't recall that.
The scene was very chaotic. Would you agree?
Yes.
All right. Could I have Exhibit 16 on the screen, please? Oh, yes, of course. I'm sorry. Okay. Now, this has previously been admitted as sort of a side-to-side comparison between your cruiser dash cam and Officer Saraf's dash cam.
Okay.
And they've been synchronized.
Okay.
If we could start at 9 minutes in, please.
So, Ms. Giannetti, this is not yet in evidence.
I had it as Exhibit 16, am I
Right.
correct?
Right. So it's not in yet.
I see. With regard to your dash cam, sir, do you recognize the bottom video here as depicting your view as you were driving to the scene?
Sure.
And that appears to be a fair and accurate representation of what was shown to you on direct examination with regard to your dash cam?
Yes.
You can continue. Okay, we can pause it there. Would you agree with me, Sergeant Goode, that you're arriving on scene at approximately 6:16 a.m. on January 29th?
Yes.
And I'd ask you to review and compare your dash cam video with the top dash cam video for the next 30 seconds or a minute, please. And I'll ask you some questions after that.
Sure.
You can pause it. Sergeant Goode, does it appear as though the top dash cam shows the exact same thing as the bottom dash cam, just from a different vantage point?
Yes.
Can you play it for another 20, 30 seconds? Okay, we can pause it there. Were you able to see when people are moving, or when somebody's moving in the top version, they're also moving in the bottom version, just, again, from different vantage points?
Yes.
So did these both appear to be fair and accurate representations of the dash cams that were going on at that time?
Yes.
I would offer that, Your Honor.
Okay, I'd like to see counsel at sidebar for just 1 second on this. So this will now become Exhibit 16. We had it as a placeholder from before. It was 379, and on Friday, we said that it would stay as 16, assuming it was put in evidence. That's what you have, Tori and Jim? Great.
Okay, we can take that off the screen. Thank you. Now, Sergeant Goode, you've testified that you got there at about 6:16 a.m. and relying on Exhibit 16 that I placed before you, correct?
Okay. Yes.
You stayed on scene for over an hour and 40 minutes. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
You left maybe around 7:50 a.m. or so?
Correct.
And during the beginning part of the 1 hour and 40 minutes that you were on scene, with all the vehicles that we've just seen at around 6:16 a.m. and for the first 10, 15 minutes with all those lights flashing, you never saw Brian Albert come out of his house, correct?
Correct.
And did you see first responders working on John O'Keefe when you were there?
No.
He had already been loaded into the ambulance at that time?
Correct.
So you didn't see him actually being scooped up and put on a stretcher, correct?
I don't recall. No. He was in...
And with regard to the remainder of the time that you were on scene, up until all the way through 7:50 in the morning, did you ever see Brian Albert come out of his home?
No.
Did you ever see anyone come out of the Albert residence?
Other than Jen McCabe and Matt McCabe, no.
Were you aware when you entered the Albert residence that morning that John O'Keefe was found on his front lawn wearing only one shoe, black in color?
I was not aware of him missing a shoe, no.
While you were there, you were listening to the questions that Sergeant Lank was asking Brian Albert?
Yes.
Did you ever hear Sergeant Lank ask Brian Albert that morning if he knew where the other shoe was that was black in color?
Objection.
Sustained.
While you were there, did you ever hear Sergeant Lank ask Brian Albert when he learned that John O'Keefe was lying on his front lawn?
Objection.
Sustained.
You knew that Brian Albert, as a Boston police officer, is a first responder, correct?
Yes.
All police officers are first responders, correct?
Yes.
You know from your training that all police officers have to receive CPR and other necessary training to be first responders, correct?
Yes.
At any point in time, did you ask Brian Albert why he didn't come out of his house?
No.
Did Sergeant Lank, in your presence, ask him why he didn't come out of his house?
Objection.
Sustained.
After clearing the scene at 7:50 in the morning, did you go back to the station?
I did.
Do you know whether or not Kevin Albert was working that day?
I don't.
Did you see Kevin Albert that day?
I don't recall seeing him.
Did you speak with Kevin Albert that day?
No.
Now, since that day, it's been almost 2.5 years. You've continued working on the same police force as Kevin Albert, correct?
Yes.
At some point in time, you and Kevin Albert discussed the fact that you were one of the first responding officers to his brother's home for this tragic incident, correct?
Yes.
It's a very unique situation, correct?
Yes.
Many officers in the department were interested to know what you saw and heard that day, correct?
Sure.
At what point in time after January 29th did Kevin Albert broach the topic with you as to what had happened on January 29th?
Objection.
Can you answer that?
Sure. I don't recall ever immediately talking to Kevin Albert about the incident. No.
Right, well, you had said that you don't recall talking to him that day, but certainly within a couple of weeks, the two of you caught up, correct?
I can't remember. No.
I'm sorry?
I can't recall that. No.
Within a couple of months, you talked about it?
Sure.
And when you say sure, sir, I take that as you're saying, well, if you really want to go there, I'll give you the sure answer. You have to answer yes or no.
Okay. Yes.
So you answer yes or no if you
Yeah.
can, and if you can't, you can't. So
Right.
ask the question again or just move on, please.
Okay. Do you recall where you were when you and Kevin Albert discussed what had happened on January 29th?
No.
Do you recall who else was present?
No.
Do you recall whether it was in person or over the phone?
I don't recall. No.
You certainly told him what you observed and heard that day, correct?
Yes.
Now, when you arrived, you were on scene not only to assist with, first aid and secure the scene, but as a first responder, your job is to assess the situation and also make an initial determination about gathering evidence. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So you'd be on the lookout for any physical evidence, correct?
Yes.
And you'd certainly be on high alert for any individual who made any statement about what may have occurred, correct?
Correct.
That's important not only for treatment purposes of somebody who apparently is hurt, but also for investigative purposes, correct?
Correct.
And again, you were the third officer on the scene by minutes in terms of the other two officers arriving before you, correct?
Yes.
And while you were on scene for over an hour and 40 minutes, and by the way, when I say on scene, it's clear to you that I'm asking you about 34 Fairview, correct?
Yes.
There was no scene at the Canton Police Department, correct?
No, I'm talking about 34 Fairview.
Of course. A scene is where something happened, correct?
Yes.
While you were on scene at 34 Fairview for an hour and 40 minutes, did you ever once hear Karen Reed say, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him?
I did not.
And you wrote a report regarding this, correct?
I did.
You are trained over your 18 years that you include every important detail in that report, correct?
Correct.
Certainly a statement by Karen Reed screaming out, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, would have been an important detail that you would have included in your report, correct?
Yes.
You do not intentionally omit, I should say, any important details from your report, correct?
Correct.
You did not include that language, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, in your report, correct?
Correct.
And the reason you didn't include it is that you never heard those words come out of Karen Reed's mouth, correct?
Correct.
Okay, now getting back to, potential physical evidence, if you're at a potential crime scene, you want to find what you can, correct?
Correct.
You want to properly secure any physical evidence, right?
Correct.
In order to assist the investigation, you're prepared to conduct a thorough search for evidence that may shed light on what had happened, correct?
Correct.
And you did participate in a thorough search in this case, did you not?
The best we could in the elements that we were dealing with. Yes.
You had previously, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off
Nope.
if I did. You had previously testified, and I think I'm quoting you, the leaf blower worked great, correct?
Yes.
You would agree with me that with that leaf blower, your department was able to actually get down to the bare ground, correct?
Yes.
And you were directed to the precise area where John O'Keefe had been laying, correct?
Yes.
And so you knew the area that needed to be searched, correct?
Yes.
You certainly want to properly search around that area, correct?
Correct.
And after John O'Keefe was in the ambulance and then transported to the hospital, that was the very area that you were eyeballing, correct?
Yes.
And you visually searched that area as best you could in the conditions, correct?
Yes.
And you tried to be as careful as you could be.
Yes.
You did not want to miss anything.
Correct.
You took the job very seriously.
Yes.
In addition to scouring the area with your eyes, did you use your hands to search in the snow?
I don't remember doing that. I was recording it.
I'm sorry.
I don't remember it that way. I was recording the scene.
I see. Okay. Did you see other officers using their hands to search the scene?
I don't recall it that.
Do you recall officers using their feet to clear some areas?
Yes.
And you were the one that actually got your leaf blower, correct?
I did.
First time you ever used that in an investigation, fair to say?
Yes.
And your search was thorough enough, when I say your search, I mean your department's search in addition to your observations. It was thorough enough that you actually did recover small droplets of blood, correct?
We did.
Who was it that collected those blood droplets?
That was Lieutenant Gallagher and Sergeant Lang.
In addition to the blood droplets, you were looking for anything else that might be out of place there?
Sure.
Small items?
Of course.
Large items?
Anything.
And as you were on scene, it was starting to get lighter as the morning progressed, correct?
Yes.
And again, you didn't clear the scene until almost 8 a.m.
Correct.
And you searched and were keeping alert to what was around you for the time that you were on scene, correct?
Yes.
During that that 1 hour, I should say, and 40 minutes, you did not find 45 pieces of red and black and clear taillight pieces at 34th Fairview, correct?
No.
How many pieces of taillight did you find on or around that property?
That morning, none.
Did you find a men's hat, black in color?
No.
Did you find a size 12 men's shoe, black in color?
No.
Now, you would agree that it's important to preserve and secure a crime scene?
Yes.
Why is that?
You don't want the crime scene to be contaminated.
And you also do not want, and you'd like to prevent a crime scene from also being manipulated. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And what steps were taken, either by you or in your presence, to close off and secure the crime scene at 34th Fairview?
We had crime scene tape up while we were there, and then we also had Officer Mulaney on the road.
And when you say you had Officer Mulaney on the road, you mean blocking off
Yeah.
the road?
Correct.
Are you aware of something called a crime scene log?
No.
You recall being trained in the academy that when there is a crime scene that needs to be preserved, it is advisable to set up a log so that all personnel are required to sign in and sign out. Again, to prevent contamination and to prevent manipulation. Do you not recall that training?
I don't recall that, no.
With regard to the fact that it was actively snowing at the time, did you consider putting a tent around the area to prevent and minimize the environmental intrusions like the snow?
It would have been useless.
Did you utilize any heaters to assist in melting the snow in that area?
No.
And before you cleared the scene, or I should say when you cleared the scene, did you post an officer to guard the scene so that nobody could get in or out?
No.
How long was the road closed off for?
While we were there, so those 2 hours.
All right. And then after the 2 hours, there was nobody guarding the scene. Would you agree?
Yes, correct.
The road was not closed off.
No.
That crime scene was open to the public.
Correct.
So with regard to, a crime scene log, a tent, heaters, keeping an officer there to make sure nobody got in or out of that crime scene, you would agree none of those protocols were followed, correct?
I don't believe there is a protocol for a tent in our policy.
Okay. So I guess leave the tent out of it. None
Okay.
of those other protocols were followed, correct?
Correct.
And certainly a tent was not put up either,
No.
correct?
Correct.
Now, with regard to your police report, going back to that, your report clearly listed persons involved in the case, correct?
Correct.
And that police report is generated by computer software, correct? That's
Yeah.
particular to police reports?
Correct.
And that's one of the categories that you can fill in, correct?
Correct.
And would you agree with me that with regard to all of the persons involved listed in your police report, everybody's first name and last name was completely spelled out except for one? Would you agree with that?
I don't. I believe those names were entered by Detective Sergeant Lang.
Okay, but certainly the report has your name on it, correct?
Correct.
So you would review the report before
Sure.
submitting it in your name, correct?
Correct.
So regardless of who entered or didn't enter, my question remains, which is that with regard to the persons involved listed in that report, everybody's name, first and last, is spelled out except for one, correct?
Correct.
Whose name was not spelled out completely?
I don't know.
May I approach?
Okay.
Page 2, Counsel. And I just
Thank
ask
you.
you to look at it silently and then look up at me when you're done. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Having reviewed that report, does that refresh your memory as to whose name was not completely spelled out?
Correct.
Who was that?
Brian Albert.
Did you omit Brian Albert's first name to mask the fact that he was involved?
No. No.
Do you know who Colin Albert is?
I know that he is Chris Albert's son.
And so therefore he'd be Brian Albert's nephew?
Yes.
Anywhere in your report, do you mention that Colin Albert was present at 34 Fairview the night of January 28th going into January 29th?
No.
Now, would you agree with me that this report also lists home addresses for everyone in the persons involved section except for one person?
Can I see the sheet again, please? Thank you.
This is the same, if I may approach,
Yes.
this is the same sheet that I sent you last time.
Thank you.
And take your time with it, sir. Thank you. And Sergeant, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
What am I talking about?
Brian Higgins.
Okay. So with regard to Brian Higgins, his home address was not listed on there, correct?
Correct.
And what address was listed for Brian Higgins?
1492 Washington Street.
And what is significant about that address?
It's the town of Canton.
It's the Town of Canton Police Department, correct?
Correct.
Now, Brian Higgins was not an involved person because he was an investigator on the case, correct?
Correct.
He was not involved in this case in an official capacity, correct?
Correct.
you were, right?
Yes.
So listing the Canton Police Department as Sergeant Sean Goode's address would be appropriate. Would you agree?
Yes.
Why was Brian Higgins' address listed at as the Canton Police Department?
I don't know.
But that is something that you kept in your report, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I also want to ask you something else about your police report. And I want to focus on whether it was altered after it was first submitted, okay? If I can,
Hold on, do you have your report with you?
I do not.
Okay. Do you have a copy for him, Mr. Yannetti? Yes, sure, go ahead. No, that's okay.
I've placed a document before you. Feel free to familiarize yourself with it, and please look up at me when you're done.
Good.
Does that appear to be your police report, sir?
Yes.
Now, and with the court's permission, I'd actually like the officer to have the report in front of him when I ask him these questions.
Okay, but nothing's going up on the screen, right?
Not yet.
Okay, so approach before it does.
I will, I promise.
Okay?
Okay, so I'm directing your attention to the first page.
Okay.
You will agree with me that this report is submitted with regard to incident number 22-87-OF,
Correct.
and this is call number 22-449, correct?
Correct.
The date and time reported is listed as January 29th of 2022 at 06:08, correct?
Correct.
Which would be in military time 6:08 a.m.
Correct.
The report date and time is listed as January 29th of 2022.
Objection, Your Honor.
All right, so why don't we come to sidebar now? And I'm sorry.
Good morning, Sergeant.
Good morning.
Sergeant, you are familiar with the key swipe system at the Canton Police Department.
Yes.
Could you explain to the jury how that works?
So police officers are issued looks like a credit card. I have it in my wallet. Anytime I enter or leave the police department, the exterior doors going out the back there's a key scan. You put up to it to unlock the door to come in. When you leave, you don't have to go in, but if you need to go into the booking area, you have to scan yourself in and out. And to get out of the sally ports, you have to scan in and out.
Okay, and just trying to keep your voice up so that
Yes,
these
sorry.
last few jurors can hear you. How many officers on your department have those keys that can be swiped?
I would believe all of them.
Okay. And how many, or strike that. Do you know how this information is stored at the Canton Police Station?
I do not. I don't know the software, but I believe it's recorded anytime we would come and go.
Okay. And you say you believe that it's recorded at the time that the information is obtained? In other words, somebody key swipes in and that information is then stored, you believe, at the Canton Police Station?
I don't know the software, so I wouldn't be able to give you an educated response to that.
And
Not sure.
do you yourself, as a sergeant, have access to the key swipe data, or is that limited to certain officers at the department?
I don't believe I have access to that. I've never accessed
You've
it.
never accessed it, okay. Your Honor, we do have a stipulation between the parties, if the court will accept it, to introduce the key swipe records from January 29th of 2022.
Okay.
I would offer that as the next exhibit.
Any objection, Mr. Lally?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Are they subject to redactions?
Yes, we have redacted them. The court can certainly take a look to make sure that,
Have you all agreed to the redactions?
May we approach Justice to that?
Yes.
before you now took the stand today, did you go over your report?
My police report?
Yes.
Yes.
Were you looking for anything specifically?
No.
How long did you take to review that report between yesterday and today?
I scanned over it.
A few minutes?
Sure. Yes.
Have you spoken to anybody about your report?
No.
Nobody from the Canton Police?
No.
You recall that I had asked you about the fact that one name had not been completely spelled out in terms of first name, right?
Yes.
And you had, I believe, indicated that Sergeant Lank was the one that altered that or added that to the report.
Not altered. So he was the one that got those names. So when he entered his report, I believe he would enter those.
Okay, and so he entered that into your report, correct?
Anybody writes a supplemental, if you have the authorization, can enter who you speak to add those names. I only spoke to Miss Roberts, Miss Reed, and Miss McCabe that morning.
Okay, but the report has your name on it, correct?
Yes.
Did you speak to anybody from the prosecution, either Mr. Lally or Ms. McLaughlin or anybody else from that office about this issue?
No.
You would agree with me that it is important when you're writing a police report to be transparent, correct?
Yes.
You want to be clear, correct?
Yes.
You do not want to mislead the reader into believing something that is not true, correct?
Yes.
Could I see P and Q for identification, please? Thank you, sir. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm showing you first P for identification. You identified that yesterday, correct?
Yes.
We went over with the jury the 5 bits of information that are up at the top of the report, starting with the incident number, correct?
Yes.
You had indicated again incident 22-87-OF,
Yes.
call 22-449,
Yes.
date and time reported January 29th of 22 at 6:08.
Yes.
And the report date and time was January 29th of 22 at 8:24 a.m., correct?
Yes.
Reporting officer, Sergeant Sean Goode, correct?
Yes.
I'd like to show you now what has been marked Q for identification. And you can hang on to P if you like. With regard to those bits of information, oh, first of all, let me have you identify Q for identification. I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm reading Q.
Okay, what is Q for identification?
Exhibit Q.
Right. What is the actual document?
We call this a face sheet.
Okay. And with regard to P for identification, that's also a face sheet, correct?
Yes.
They appear to be nearly identical, correct?
Correct, except I'm looking at the top right corner. One says 1/30/2022, and the next would be 10/25/2022.
That is the print date of the report, correct?
Okay. I don't know.
So regardless of when those two face sheets had been printed, ignore that. With regard to the information about the incident number and the date of the report and the date of the incident and the reporting officer, those appear to be identical, correct?
Correct.
Now, with regard to P for identification, which is the first report that you were shown, and you were shown that yesterday, and now you have it in front of you, there is a photo on the right side of that report, is there not?
There is.
Do you know what that photo is of?
It looks like the scene probably a couple days later when the snow had melted.
Okay. Does it look like a berm that was actually
Exposed?
uncovered by the officers on scene the very first day?
Yes. Are we looking at Q?
No, at
At
P.
P? Yes. P, yes. It looks like the berm. Correct.
And then with regard to Q for identification, which again is the face sheet with the identical information, is there a different photo?
Yes.
What does that photo appear to depict, if you know?
It looks like the same area that Mr. O'Keefe possibly was found, I believe.
Those two documents, P for identification and Q for identification, those are actually your report, correct?
Correct. But can I explain?
Mr. Lally will, I'm sure, let you explain. At this point, I'm going to be asking the questions, if you
Okay.
don't mind. Your Honor, I would offer into evidence as full exhibits both P and Q for identification. Just the face sheet.
Is there an objection?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, the objection sustained.
May we approach?
Okay? Could I see those, please, Si?
Okay, I've placed a photo before you, Sergeant Goode. Do you recognize what that depicts?
Yes.
What does it depict?
I believe that's a photo of a piece of a taillight.
Okay. And when you say a photo of a piece of a taillight, you're obviously referring to a piece of a taillight allegedly found at 34 Fairview in Canton?
Yes.
Now, that photo is the photo that is included in Exhibit Q for identification that you previously saw, right? That's the second photo, is it not?
On the second face sheet that he gave me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. And I'm showing you, if I may approach again,
Yes.
what has already been marked Exhibit 20A. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
What do you recognize that to be?
That's the berm from that morning.
Okay. And Exhibit 20A is the photo that was in the first version of your report, which was P for identification, correct?
Yes.
I can take those back from you, sir.
You're welcome.
Just do it like that. Where's the Elmo? Right here. Can you set that up?
Published the two I'm sorry. With regard to the first photo that you identified, which was the piece of taillight that allegedly was found at 34 Fairview, that was a fair and accurate representation of that photo, correct?
Yes.
All right. May I offer that, Your Honor?
Okay, there's no objection, Mr. Lally?
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
Exhibit 42.
22.
Okay, and I'm sorry, the exhibit number was
42.
42, thank you. May I publish 20A and 42 separately for the jury, Your Honor?
Okay.
Okay. 20A is, you've testified, the photo of the berm that was included in the first version of your police report, which was P for identification, correct?
Yes.
All right. Let's put up 42, please. No. I'm sorry. Where is 42?
Right here.
I don't have it.
Oh, you have it?
Yeah.
No wonder. Thank you, Mr. McDermott.
Sure.
Okay. The exhibit sticker's upside down, but, oh, there we go. That is the photo of the piece of taillight allegedly found at 34 Fairview that you have identified as Exhibit 42, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, having seen those photos, one was included in P for identification, one was included in Q for identification, correct?
Yes.
Which you've previously identified as your reports. Or report, I should say.
Yes.
All right. Your Honor, I would offer the top portion of P and Q for identification as a full exhibit.
Okay, and there's an objection from the Commonwealth?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. It will come in, when the jury actually gets it, we'll have it on the same 9x12 paper that everything else is.
Terrific.
And all exhibits go through Madam Court Reporter.
Oh, of course.
He becomes 43.
So, jurors, I'm going to send you out for 5 minutes, okay?
Okay. Sergeant Goode, you have previously testified about the details in these reports. You would agree that each of these reflects your report. It says Reporting Officer Sergeant Sean Goode, correct?
Yes.
Each of these is page 1 of your report, correct?
Yes.
You've previously testified that you call that the face sheet of the report, correct?
Yes.
Each of these has the identical incident number and call number, correct?
Yes.
The identical date and time reported, correct?
Yes.
The identical report date and time, correct?
Yes.
And of course, the identical officer.
Yes.
Other than the print date of the face sheet of your report, one appears to be in January, one appears to be in October, the major change is the photo that's included on the face sheet, correct?
Yes. Can I explain why?
So that second photo with the piece of taillight that is included on the first page of your report, that photo is not from January 29th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
You never took a photo of a piece of taillight on January 29th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
You never saw a piece of taillight at 34 Fairview on January 29th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
Did you personally switch the photo on the face sheet of your police report?
No.
Do you know who did?
So whoever updated the report, their supplemental, you add photos.
But in answer to my question, do you know the specific person from your department who altered the photo on the face sheet of your report?
I didn't take the supplemental report, so I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know who took the photo.
But given that this is your report, you're the reporting officer, you are responsible for the content of that report, are you not?
For my report, yes, not other officers' supplementals to an investigation.
All right, but this is your report. This is the face sheet for the reporting officer, Sergeant Sean Goode, is it not?
Yes, on the face sheet.
All right. Now, would you agree with me that someone reading this report and seeing that the date and time of the report is listed as January 29th of 2022 at 8:24 a.m., that's when you wrote it, correct?
That's when I logged in, yes.
Somebody reading that and seeing a photo of a piece of taillight might believe that that photo is from the same date that you're writing the report, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Do you think it's misleading to include a photo on the face sheet of the report when the report is dated January 29th of 2022 and the photo is not from that day, it's from sometime later?
Objection.
Sustained.
Is there anything on what is now marked Exhibit 44 on that face sheet that indicates the date and time that that photo on Exhibit 44 was taken?
No.
Is there anything on Exhibit 44, that face sheet of your report, that indicates that it applies to some supplemental report that was later filed?
No.
I may have a moment.
Yes.
Nothing further, thank you.
All right, please take the exhibit down. And we need that exhibit, Mr. Yannetti.
Oh, yes, of course. We have two others as well,
Okay, the exhibits are to remain up here with the clerk.
with the clerk.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, go right ahead, Mr. Lally.
Thank you. So, Sergeant Goode, turning back to some questions you were asked yesterday in regard to Christopher Albert and whether or not he was a town selectman, is that correct?
Yes.
And he is currently, is that correct?
Yes.
And was he on January 29th of 2022?
No.
So he was elected to the Board of Selectmen subsequent to this date that you've been talking about, January 29th, 2022, correct?
Yes.
Now, the location where you were directed to where Mr. O'Keefe had been located just after 6 a.m., where was that in relation to the property line between 34 Fairview Road and the home next door?
If I had to guess, probably 10, 12 feet to the property line.
Now, you were asked some questions about having been to that residence at 34 Fairview Road prior. And you indicated that you had been there years ago with Sergeant Lang, is that correct?
Yes.
And what was that in regard to, sir?
It was a hit and run investigation.
And who, if anyone, so why were you at that residence at 34 Fairview Road?
So there was a call for a motor vehicle crash at the corner of Dedham and Washington Street, and the suspect vehicle had fled the scene. Officer Lank was my partner that night. He followed the oil spill of the vehicle down Dedham Street, up Cedar Crest, all the way down to the intersection of Cedar Crest to Fairview, and the oil spill actually drove into 34 Fairview, where we found the vehicle.
And who, if anyone, did you, through your investigation, who, if anyone, did you associate with operating that vehicle?
That'd be Tim Albert.
And was Mr. Timothy Albert, was he charged in reference to that incident?
Yes, he was.
And do you know approximately when that was?
It was in 2009. I don't know the exact date, but I know the year.
Now, as far as your report, you asked a number of questions about that. But I'm sorry, before I get to that, you had testified earlier that when you were leaving the scene, there was an amount of snow that had compiled on your windshield, correct?
Yes.
And after leaving the scene, what if anything happened with the snowfall sort of throughout the course of the day?
Our windshield was completely covered. We had to take time, clear off our windshields. It had snowed considerably.
And then following that, throughout sort of the course of the rest of the day and the afternoon, what if anything did you observe about the snowfall at that point?
It continually got worse.
Now, as far as your report is concerned, what you were shown and what you've seen, has there been any change as far as your narrative in reference to who you talked to, what they said, anything of that effect?
No.
You've been asked a bunch of questions about what you called a face sheet. Can you explain to the jury sort of what a face sheet is and sort of how that comes into being?
Easiest way, it's the top sheet of the report. It's not the actual meat of the report. It just gives you the date and time. Usually, if you can fit it on the front of the sheet, it would be the first party would be involved. If there was a suspect, defendant, and that's it. It would be their name, date of birth, social security number, all of their personal information.
So, as far as you were saying, it's sort of the meat of the report, it has no real relation to that, correct?
Correct.
Now, you were handed two exhibits or two parts of the report, and you were told to ignore the date that they were printed, correct?
Correct.
And so, what, if any, significance would the date that they were printed have in relation to what's on a face sheet?
So, in this case, there was supplemental reports done after the 29th. So those reports were added to my initial report. You can add a supplemental narrative. So if that includes meeting new people, talking to other people, or taking photos of anything you found, you would add that to our report, and it would be documented in the supplemental.
And you had offered, I believe, a couple times to explain to the jury sort of why a photo might be different from one face sheet when it's printed versus a subsequent date when the face sheet is printed. Can you explain to the jury at this time sort of why would that be different?
So when that face sheet was printed, if photo number one was the top photo, and now there was a new photo added, that could be now the top photo on that face sheet when it was printed.
And how would that be something that someone would physically go in and do, or is that something that sort of within the system automatically occurs, if you know?
I don't know how the system numbers the photos. So we added our photos on January 29th, and then any photos subsequent to that were added. I don't know how the software would put them 1 through 20 or how many there were.
Nothing further on.
Okay,
If I might,
very briefly.
you had just talked about how Tim Albert was charged as a result of the investigation that you did years ago, correct?
Yes,
The evidence in that case, you would agree with me, was strong against Tim Albert for that crime, was it not?
for leaving the scene, yes.
Sure. Sergeant Link actually was able to follow the trail of fluid from the accident scene right to 34 Fairview, correct?
Yes,
And Tim Albert admitted that he got nervous and left the scene, correct?
correct.
All right. Now, despite the fact that he was charged, are you aware that the case was just flat out dismissed upon restitution?
Objection, move to strike, Your Honor.
The objection sustained.
Nothing further.
Jurors, you're to disregard that. All right, you're all set, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.